Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2014's Shovel Knight, the Kickstarter darling inspired by the Nintendo Entertainment System, in which the player tackles the Order of No Quarter with shovel in hand.
After that, it's the indie fighter starring an almost entirely female roster and featuring a jazzy dark deco aesthetic, 2012's Skullgirls.
It continues your spooky month of October. It certainly does.
Yeah.
But yeah, how are you doing this week, Joe?
I'm doing all right. I just yesterday, actually, at time of recording, or 2 days at time of recording, I started a thing on the Nintendo World Report channel where I am streaming a different horror game every week. We played Oxenfree, which I will talk about in a couple weeks, actually. Just spoilers for the future. And it was very fun. This week I'm playing Detention. That is actually today when this airs. I will be playing Detention this evening, so pop on in if you are interested in that.
Check that out, and also check out your video on Sweet Home.
Yeah. It was a lot. I've never actually edited a video like that before, so.
If you're wondering where the foundations of Resident Evil came from, Sweet Home, and we actually may be bringing up that game later in the show. Themes for this week. We've got a couple. These are big crowdfunding successes in a variety of ways. But also, it's the first week where the primary composers for these 2 games, we've already talked about them. So we'll be bringing up a composer to highlight who assisted on these soundtracks. I think that's a first. But these are games that I know I've been itching to talk about Shovel Knight for a very long time, and it could not wait an extra 2 to 3 months. It just couldn't. But I really wanted to talk about that. But speaking of all these composers that we've talked about before, they continue to do great work, and we want to highlight when different headlines come up with their work and what they're doing. So let's talk about some composer follow-up headlines. Supergiant Games with, Bastion and Transistor and the like. We've mentioned with Darren Korb in the past that he did a concert with Ashley Barrett and Austin Wintory conducting a chamber orchestra at PAX West, and they were doing a Supergiant 10th anniversary concert. Supergiant Games officially uploaded an official version of that concert to YouTube, so go check that out. It's excellent, and I'm glad that they put out a really refined, nice version as opposed to someone screen capping the stream or something like that. So really, really nice production value there.
And following that, Austin Wintory and Jesper Kyd, who are 2 composers we have talked about in the past, obviously, they are going to the Game Music Festival in Poland, alongside a bunch of other names that we haven't really gotten into yet. So those are the main 2 that we're bringing up. But yeah, I'm not in Poland, so I can't go. But if you're in Poland, you should.
That's cool that Poland gets that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely check that out. Let's get into talking about Shovel Knight. I mean, Shovel Knight is one of those games that if you have not played it, certainly you have heard of Shovel Knight. Whether it's one of independent gaming's most lauded franchises that you've heard about, or one of the most recognizable characters from the indie game scene, surely you've heard of the character, but this is the original installment, the original game for that series. Shovel Knight was released on June 26th, 2014, worldwide on PC, and also in North America for Nintendo 3DS and Wii U. Now, PAL got the 3DS and Wii U version on November 5th, 2014. So, at least 5 months later for those European countries and Australia. Japan, on the other hand, had to wait about 2 years. Japan got the game on 3DS and Wii U on June 30th, 2016. So still several months before Switch came out, but well after Shovel Knight was released worldwide on PC, North America, for those Nintendo consoles. In the meantime, Shovel Knight was released on a wide variety of platforms, including Mac, Linux, PS3, Vita, PS4, Xbox One, Amazon Fire TV, and it was a launch title on Nintendo Switch. Nowadays, the game Shovel Knight is most easily accessible through Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. Now, this is the collection of games where the original Shovel Knight became named Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope, which is their way of kind of subtitling the original campaign. Because as part of the Kickstarter backer, reward goals and all that, they funded 3 additional campaigns with different playable characters. So those 3 campaigns each have their own subtitle as part of the Shovel Knight universe. But Treasure Trove for Shovel Knight, it's about $25 digitally. I think they have a $40 collectible physical version if that's more your speed. But this Treasure Trove version is Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope, these 3 extra campaigns, and then this multiplayer battle game as well. So it's a tremendous value for that money. And so if you're looking to play the original Shovel Knight, that's probably the easiest way to go about doing that, certainly for the most value. Shovel Knight is developed and published by Yacht Club Games, and it's a 2D action platformer that's inspired by 8-bit visuals, music, and game design. Now, with Shovel Knight's trusty tool at his side, players can dig up treasure, swipe at enemies, or bounce on objects with a pogo-like attack. You also get magical abilities that can be discovered throughout the world and throughout the game, and this enhances Shovel Knight's options of attack, platforming, or interaction with the world. It's broken up into stages that are very much like Mega Man's Robot Masters, in that the levels are themed after these different knights that rule over these levels. The narrative goes as such, as it's NES inspired. It goes with these screenshots and text underneath it. So I pulled the different quotes, and it kind of gives you a gist of what the story is. It's, quote, "Long ago, the lands were untamed and roamed by legendary adventurers. Of all heroes, none shone brighter than Shovel Knight and Shield Knight. But their travels together ended at the Tower of Fate, when a cursed amulet wrought a terrible magic. When Shovel Knight awoke, the tower was sealed and Shield Knight was gone. His spirit broken, a grieving Shovel Knight went into a life of solitude. But without champions, the land was seized by a vile power, the Enchantress and her Order of No Quarter. Now, the tower is unsealed and devastation looms. A new adventure is about to begin." So essentially, Shovel Knight is going after the love of his life, Shield Knight, who disappeared in this terrible accident at the Tower of Fate. So, Joe, this is where I ask you, what are our experiences with Shovel Knight?
I played it on 3DS. This game's really good. I own it on Switch, but I've not actually played it or any of the DLC. But I did play it on 3DS shortly after it came out. It's probably among my favorite indie games. There's a reason why Shovel Knight is like the mascot of the indie game scene now.
Absolutely. It's an incredible game. I got it at launch, but I got it for Wii U. And I tried it, and I've probably documented in the past, like, I did not grow up with 2D games, so it's something I struggle with. And so I got a little bit into the game, but eventually dropped it to play other things. And then I did try it when I bought Treasure Trove at launch on Nintendo Switch. Just need more games besides Breath of the Wild at launch, right? And I certainly wasn't getting 1-2 Switch. So I tried Shovel Knight again, and something clicked, and I loved it. Loved it. Beat it. Really enjoyed it. I did play Plague of Shadows, that DLC, but I really could not gel well at all with the bomb jumping mechanics there.
I hear that a lot, actually. That's one of the least popular side campaign.
it is very different. I'm sure it's good, but it's something I couldn't gel with. And then Spectre of Torment was amazing too. Like, just as good. A different playstyle where you're actually slashing enemies. You have this diagonal upward or downward attack that you can use on enemies, obstacles. It really helps with the platforming. Makes it a more kind of traditional, action platformer in a way, because you have that big scythe at your disposal. Super, super fun. And I can't wait for King of Cards. That's coming out at the end of this year. It's going to be so, so good. So, yeah, it's something I struggled with originally playing on Wii U, but a few years later, really got into it. I really, really adore this game. It's interesting you played it on 3DS, because that's, I guess, a 5:3 aspect ratio there, which is unusual, but also just a different way of looking at that world.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be really weird to go back to it on Switch one of these days and be like, a full screen. Weird.
Yeah. So learning about the development of Shovel Knight was certainly interesting. Learning that, I guess, the idea of the game started out as, quote, sort of as a joke conversation over lunch that kind of got too serious. And it makes me think of the recently released Untitled Goose Game, where that was just a joke in their Slack channel, and they're like, no, really, what if we make a game out of it? So, I mean, sometimes, these ideas just come from nowhere and they become great things, even though much to my dog's dismay.
So take this as a lesson. If you have a stupid idea for a game that would be dumb and goofy, make it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good idea. Yacht Club knew that they kind of wanted to make a game that was based on the NES classics that the team grew up playing when they were kids. And they decided that they all kind of really liked the downward sword thrust move in Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. I know everyone kind of points towards the cane pogo from DuckTales, which I feel like it's a little closer to when it comes to actual gameplay, but I guess the original inspiration was Zelda 2's sword thrust, or, down air for Link in Super Smash Brothers. But besides Zelda 2 and DuckTales, the other game influences include Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, Super Mario Bros. 3, Mega Man, UN Squadron, and Dark Souls. And you can kind of see why in different ways if you're familiar with the game.
Actually, I just had this look of wait, Dark Souls, and then I remembered, oh, right.
The coins, the gold.
Yeah, the corpse run.
Pick it up when you die. So, Shovel Knight is one of Kickstarter's most prominent success stories. Certainly one of its earliest ones when it comes to video games. It was a campaign that launched on March 17th, 2013, with a goal of $75,000. The final total ended up being $311,502. So, yeah, basically 4 plus times as much. Very, very successful, especially in those early Kickstarter days. It wasn't, the millions of, the ukuleles or the Mighty Number 9s or the Bloodstains, but considering how long Shovel Knight has gone on and how critically acclaimed it has been, it's up there in the Kickstarter success stories. Not to mention what Kickstarter's going through right now, but it was a much simpler, brighter time.
Yeah. This was one of the first big successes, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I can't think of another one, because this would have been pre Mighty Number 9, wouldn't it have been?
Yeah. I think it was. And, because it certainly didn't hit the dollar totals that these other big ones did. But yeah, when you think back on what has been the best game to come out of a crowdfunded game like this, Shovel Knight's up there.
When people talk about Kickstarter successes, Shovel Knight is usually the first title that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. So, as part of all these different stretch goals through Kickstarter, additional features that were kind of put on deck included a 4-player battle mode, a mission-based challenge mode, an additional mode that swaps all the characters' genders, and also additional playable story campaigns for 3 boss characters. Now, many of these stretch goals have already been delivered on, but everything will be completed, like the 4-player battle mode and the third of the 3, boss campaigns. This will all be completed by the end of 2019. So it really shows the longevity, 5.5 years of Shovel Knight. And it's also interesting to note that we've talked about, the super best friends on this show before. Matt and Wooly from Best Friends Zaibatsu, they contributed to the Director for a Day reward tier. And this was something where you could work with Yacht Club to add your own original creation to the game. And this resulted in their creation of the boss fight character, Baz.
Well, so I believe this is the first time this happened, but when they were a channel, this was like their goal whenever they got a Kickstarter that had an option for add a character into the game. So Baz is in Dive Kick as well because of similar things. I don't remember what other games they put him into. Those are the two that come to mind. So this was basically an inside joke for them, was they would support Kickstarters with this kind of tier and they would put the Baz into the game.
And he's quite the boss fight.
He's a very fun boss fight.
So other directors for a day included characters like Phantom Striker, Ray's Seatlan, Mr. Hat, and Liquid Samurai. So I guess there were 10 slots available, but only 5 were filled through the Kickstarter backer rewards. The game was originally slated for release in September 2013, which is certainly ambitious to announce the game in March and then say it'll be out 6 months later.
Ooh.
So we know that didn't happen, but the delay wasn't as bad compared to other Kickstarter games. Originally delayed to early 2014, eventually landed June 2014. So a year and 3 months later, that's honestly not too bad. Because the NES was a big inspiration, they tried to follow a lot of the sort of development guidelines of the NES. Yacht Club did, but they kind of pushed the boundaries a little bit. I won't go into full details. There's actually a really interesting blog on Gama Sutra that is titled Breaking the NES for Shovel Knight. If you're interested to read up on it, it's a big breakdown of like all the different ways they kind of pushed and stretched things. But some of these include, the widescreen display, background parallax scrolling, no sound muting on the different tracks, sprite flickering, and adding 4 extra colors to the NES palette, among plenty of others. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested.
Basically, what they did is what every retro style game should do, is they made a game that is how you remember the NES looking, not how the NES actually looked and acted.
Right. That's a very, very good way of putting it. Shovel Knight is also a big deal, not only because of his status in the world of indie games, but he also had his own amiibo made. And this may not seem like a big deal in 2019, but in 2014, when amiibos were coming on the scene and a whole bunch of them for Super Smash Bros. And whatnot, Shovel Knight suddenly gets his own amiibo made. Big deal at the time. Also because it unlocked an exclusive multiplayer co-op mode on Wii U. It would eventually come over to Treasure Trove, though not on 3DS or Vita. But that was a unique thing for a while on Wii U. The PlayStation and Xbox versions, though, had their own version-exclusive features, including a lengthy boss battle against Kratos with 8-bit original God of War music and all, as well as an entire Battletoads theme level and boss fight on Xbox. Again, Battletoads music, swinging down the cavern, doing the jumping over the hurdles on the bikes. I mean, the whole bit. So, very loyal adaptations there. Shovel Knight is reviewed well, with Metacritic averages for the different platforms kind of averaging about to a 90, which is still really good. If anything, I think the most critical comments were about the difficulty level in certain stages where some of the jumps and enemy placements, whatever, kind of involved trial and error. I guess I kind of get that, but a lot of glowing praise in these different reviews. And Nintendo World Report gave it a 10, and I think it's worthy of that personally. The game sold 180,000 copies in its first month after release, and as of June 2019, Shovel Knight has sold over 2.5 million copies.
That's a lot of copies.
That is a lot, especially for an indie game. It didn't win a ton of awards, but it was pretty notable in that it won Best Independent Game at the Game Awards 2014. That was the first year of that version of Keighley's show. Now, of course, this was just the beginning for Shovel Knight, as we've kind of hinted. The first of those 3 boss campaigns, Plague of Shadows, that released on September 17th, 2015. Spectre of Torment released first on Nintendo Switch. That was when Treasure Trove made its debut before it came to the other platforms. But that was March 3rd, 2017, launch day for the Switch. And then King of Cards, which is the third with King Knight, as well as the multiplayer battle game Shovel Knight Showdown. Those are scheduled to release in December 2019. And that's all included in Treasure Trove. So, again, a remarkable value if you decide to get that. That was something where if you own the original Shovel Knight before that came out, like, you immediately got that upgraded to Treasure Trove, which was a super cool deal. Just fantastic. Now, we do mention that Shovel Knight is kind of the indie mascot, and it's because he's been featured in plenty of other indie games, whether it's as a cameo or a playable character. He's a playable guest character in Indie Pogo, Runbow, Blade Strangers, Cook, Serve Delicious, Battle Kitchen, Move or Die, Dino Run DX, Runner 3, Riverbond, Rivals of Ether, Blaster Master Zero, and Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. He's even going to be a playable character in upcoming releases of Hex Heroes, Road Redemption, and Indivisible.
Yeah.
Which is going to be something we'll tie into the next game there. He is a secret boss in Azure Striker Gunvolt 2. You have to use the amiibo to unlock him there. He's even featured along with different Shovel Knight characters as different character skins in Brawlhalla, which is the Smash-like platform fighter that Ubisoft ended up buying. He has a cameo in Yooka-Laylee, which is another big Kickstarter success game there, as well as Sun Creature Studios' animated series The Reward, Tales of Elethrion. And in Super Smash Bros., he's an assist trophy, which has to be like the biggest fist bump. I mean, before Sans got a Mii costume, right? To recognize an indie game in that capacity, to put Shovel Knight as an assist trophy, I would have loved to see him as a playable character, but it was not to be. But still, an assist trophy, that's going to be a real proud moment for Yacht Club.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal, too. The only sad part that came out of that was that if any indie character was going to be playable in Smash, I personally feel like it would have been Shovel Knight. Granted, absolutely. I still think Shantae has kind of a chance. Maybe?
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I think you're right. Shovel Knight had the biggest odds. So it's certainly interesting to see. Now, Yacht Club isn't done with Shovel Knight because they recently announced at a Yacht Club Direct that they are working on Shovel Knight Dig, which is the next Shovel Knight game. It features 16-bit inspired graphics, vertically descending level design, new knights to defeat, of course, and more music from Jake Kaufman. The release date on that is still to be determined, but Shovel Knight is not done just yet.
And then in 5 years, we'll get Shovel Knight 64.
And that would be certainly something to see, I think. But yeah, it's certainly interesting to see this character continue to grow. Now, the music for Shovel Knight is primarily composed by Jake Kaufman, and we've talked about Vert before on our Shantae episode with Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. So if you'd like his background info, go check out that episode. But we'll talk about the other composer that contributed to this game, and that's Manami Matsumae. Manami Matsumae, she was born Manami Goto on December 25th, 1964 in Tokyo, Japan. She says that, quote, "When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I listened to a song my father played on his acoustic guitar once, which apparently led me to playing an electone organ." Ding, 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 ding. There's another one for the electone.
That's, how many is that? That's like 4 now. 5?
5? Maybe 5.
I think 5.
So score another one for Japanese kids learning on the electone. And apparently she played with perfect pitch in that, she heard what was played and was able to replicate that perfectly. And she says that this surprised her father. So he brought me to a music class where I began learning the piano. After that, I did nothing but played the piano and eventually entered college. I didn't engage in activities such as playing in a band during high school. So, piano was her life. She majored in piano at the illustrious Osaka University of the Arts, with expectations that she was going to become a piano teacher. But then she saw a job hunting bulletin where Capcom was recruiting people who could create music. Now, she was familiar with music from Super Mario Bros. And Dragon Quest at the time, and she also knew that Capcom was a game company, and it sounded like work she wanted to do, so she gave it a shot. Didn't expect to be hired. She had being a piano teacher as a fallback, but she was hired and joined Capcom in the late 1980s. And she is generally credited in games because, at the time, game companies didn't want to put the real names of people who were working on the game, so they gave them aliases. Hers is Chanchakorin. So this is actually what she goes by on Twitter today, at Chanchakorin. So if you'd like to follow Miss Matsumae, you can do so at Chanchakorin. She found it relatively easy to compose tones for 3 channels. The NES at the time generally had 5 sound channels, but one was meant for percussion and another was meant for some other samples, but it was primarily like 3 tones that you could use for music. And this was something that she was familiar with, as she noted that she once played Bach's The Well-Tempered Clavier in college, which is, I guess, a piano piece that has 3 or 4 layers of tones going along with it. But she didn't really have any experience with rhythm-based songs at first, really adding any rhythm to it, any drums. So she studied the drums by listening to a lot of music that was popular at the time. She noted Propaganda, Phil Collins, and Mezzo Forte. The original Mega Man is a standout title in her discography, and it really kickstarted her involvement in the game industry, and it's what many people remember her music contributions by. She composed all of the music for the original Mega Man, composed all of the sound effects that have become iconic with that series, the dying sound, the 1-ups, the E-tanks, all of that. Like, that's her work. So that's what she likes to remember as, one of her favorite composition projects. But as far as game series that she likes to play, she likes Fire Emblem the most. Specifically, her favorite Fire Emblem title is Fire Emblem Thracia 776, which I believe is a Japanese-only title.
I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
So, not one we know over here, but that's her favorite. She's inspired by music from the 1980s, particularly Toto and Queen. Also, jazzist Pat Metheny, which I'm like, we've mentioned that name before. And it turns out it was during our Yuka Tsujioko episode, where she was also inspired by Pat Metheny. In fact, during an AMA, Matsumae was asked about her 3 favorite songs of all time, and she noted Let Us Cling Together by Queen, The First Circle by Pat Metheny Group, and Africa by Toto. I mean, just a classic song. She ended up marrying Kimitaka Matsumae, who is also a musician, a composer, who was, I guess, originally part of Sega's SST band, and she also worked with him on the game projects Othello World and Jade Cocoon 2. Matsumae helped establish the Tokyo-based label Brave Wave in 2014, and this is a label that helps connect composers with overseas companies, and it was through this that it was how she contributed music to Shovel Knight. Miss Matsumae released a solo album titled 3 Movements in December 2019. So yes, for games, she's most well known for the original Mega Man. And, creating all of those original songs and the sound effects and whatnot. But then she was transferred to Capcom's arcade division. So she wasn't brought back for Mega Man 2. That's primarily Takashi Tateishi. And honestly, it was actually apparently at Tateishi's request that he really wanted her to compose something on the Mega Man 2 soundtrack. And so she composed Airman's theme for Mega Man 2. Apparently this was a secret that was only supposed to be known by a few people. So when the interviewer that I pulled this interview from brought this up, she's like, what? How did you know that? Like, that's not supposed to be known. He's like, oh, well, I found it on a fan site, and I guess fans must have dug into it, pretty hard. So I found that really interesting. She also technically contributed to Mega Man 2's intro, because that first section of the piece comes directly from the intro of Mega Man 1's ending. So it's like exactly the same before it goes into that opening bit is Matsumaya's work as well. She also composed for the original Dynasty Wars, UN Squadron, and Magic Sword. She also contributed to Mega Man 10, Shovel Knight, and Mighty Number 9. And bringing up Sweet Home here, she apparently provided some arrangements on the NES game Sweet Home.
Interesting.
Though she's credited in the credits as Chancha Colon.
See, I never caught that, mainly because it's impossible to find any information on the people that worked on that game that aren't Tokuro Fujisawa.
Right. So I saw that amongst the different credits on arrangements. I'm like, I gotta bring that up after Joe worked so hard on that video for Nintendo World Report. So Shovel Knight has interesting notes when it comes to the development of its soundtrack. As I mentioned, it is primarily composed by Jake Kaufman, with Manami Matsumaya composing 2 tracks that I'll play excerpts for you here. The first of which being 1,000 Leagues Below. This is the theme music for Iron Whale, which is Treasure Knight's stage. And I think the real standout, this was so close to making either the Critical 5 or the Cutting Room Floor, so I'm glad I at least get to play it a little bit here. Flowers of Atrimony. And this is the stage music for the Explodatorium, or Plague Knight's stage. So these were the 2 songs that she contributed, and you can definitely hear that old school Mega Man sort of sound and vibe in there, and it really, really works well. So I really wanted to highlight those since we didn't get to bring it up in the actual main tracks that we'll be discussing. So when it came to composing Shovel Knight's soundtrack, this is now primarily from the perspective of Jake Kaufman here. He used the program Famitracker, which is a free NES music tool. It has the interface of a spreadsheet, and there's this heavy usage of hex numbers and low-level scripting, but it was used for the composition of the project. And specifically, the program can emulate different NES styles, different memory chips, different sound chips, profiles, all that. So it emulated, in this case, the VRC-6, which was an advanced memory management controller that was actually made by Konami. And this added 3 extra sound channels to the NES's default of 5. It was something that Japan, I guess, had access to on different versions, maybe of the Famicom, even though, North America, at least for the NES, was kind of just stuck to this kind of default NES build. So 8 channels overall. It kind of helps expand the sound, but still sounds 8-bit. He certainly wanted to use the Ricoh RP2A03 sound processor, and its shorthand is generally called 2A03. This is the default on all of the NTSC NES models. Now, PAL uses the 2A07 apparently. Exactly the same, but it has a clock rate of 50 Hz instead of 60, which makes sense when you consider the video frame rate of those TVs. Now, Kaufman is friends with the Yacht Club team in real life outside of work. So he says that he was already in on the Shovel Knight concept before development even began. And that's unusually early for most composers that we talk about in these different game projects. He says, quote, "I was on the phone singing Shovel Knight to director Sean Velasco, laughing like idiots the night we began working on the first mock-up trailer." Overall, the work on the soundtrack says took about a year. And he says, quote, "As soon as I heard that you were going to play as a knight wielding a shovel, ideas began flooding through my head. It needed pomp, triumphant fanfares, Mega Man, sick beats, over-the-top embellishments, heavy orchestration. He says that almost no revisions were needed. He said, not that I was too good or anything, but really that everyone was on the same wavelength, and it made kind of the whole vision very clear, very easy. But he does remark that collaboration with Manami Matsumae was very special. He said, quote, Manami Matsumae still has it to a ridiculous degree after 25 plus years, and still taught me things through her music, just like Mega Man 1 did all those years ago. She's a master and an inspiration, and enriched our lives just by signing on. We literally wept when we first heard the first versions of her tracks. I mean, it shows like the impact of, you know, when Mega Man's a clear influence to Shovel Knight, to have the original composer of Mega Man contribute to the project in some way. I mean, it gives it a little bit of extra soul. But I do have to credit Jake Kaufman for these compositions because it's music that's right up his alley. I mean, we both love his work so much. And Shovel Knight is one of his most glorious accomplishments, I think. And it just shows it perfectly. Let's get into those 5 critical tracks and show you just why. And we've got to start with Strike the Earth. This is for the intro stage, the Plains of Passage. So this is kind of your first introduction to Shovel Knight music. I mean, outside of the main theme, outside of the map screen, this is the first stage. And so you're really hearing the energy here, and it captures that Kaufman composition style immediately. The reliance on the melody, and what a catchy melody it is. It's so good, and it's one of the ones like it absolutely had to be here. I played this stage personally plenty of times to rack up gold for the game to help with that 100% completion. And if you got to do that, you're going to hear this one a lot. And fortunately, that's a good thing.
Oh, the song is so good, though. Like, we talk a lot about like, oh man, if this is one of the first songs you hear, that's how you know that it's going to be a good soundtrack. But this is maybe among one of the best first stage songs ever.
Yeah, maybe.
It is definitely like top 3 songs in the game for me. It's just so good. It's such a good song.
I love it a whole lot. Again, definitely had to be here.
Fun fact, I actually heard a version of this song that you might bring up later. I don't know. I heard this on a version of the song playing on a Smashified, if you remember that series. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When he did like a render, quote unquote, of Shovel Knight. And that's what caused me to buy the game immediately after that.
Yep, that arrangement is especially good, and you're right. We will bring it up later. The second critical track, though, The Vital Vitriol. This is the music for the battle against Plague Knight. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the music for the Explodatorium. This one is interesting because it definitely has a darker energy to it, but it's still really driving. And it's a tough boss fight, especially for an earlier boss in the game. I've heard from several people like that this was their breaking point and this is where they didn't continue with the game after this. I'm like, oh no! But this song is so good. The game at points does get difficult, but it's very fair. And I like to think that the music helps drive you forward. And it's good to listen to these songs over and over again, if anything. So I think this is one of those perfect examples. It's a real good intensity to the boss fight. These fluttering notes of the just to do that on, to emulate the 8-bit sound sounds fantastic. So good.
This is my favorite song in the game. 100%, bar none. I love this song. I don't remember a lot of the boss. It's been a real long time, but this is the song I think I have gone back to listen to more than any other song in the entire soundtrack. It's absolutely fantastic.
It's so cool. It has like different stages of the melody to it. And so it's a cool loop overall. So good. Number 3 on the Critical 5, we have Of Devious Machinations. This is the music for Clockwork Tower, and this is the Tinker Knight stage. Now, when we're talking about Tinker Knight and machinations, clockwork, it makes perfect sense that you can clearly hear this metallic clinking and clanking, which, again, for 8-bit, so well done, so well executed, and it's another melody that is just so prominent and catchy, and it will be in your ears for days. This is one that I think it's sneaky good. I don't know if a lot of people remember this one because it's one of the later stages in the game, but it's one that when I hear it come up, it's like, oh yeah, this is among my favorites. I had to put it here.
I am actually kind of surprised to find out this is not a Matsumae song because this is really Mega Man.
Oh, it's like Metal Man, even though she didn't compose that one, but yeah, very much Mega Man, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree that the little metallic clinking and stuff that you can hear just gives it that flavor that you don't hear in other 8-bit songs. I think the closest I can think of is what we talked about, The Messenger and music for the music box.
Absolutely.
But outside of that, I don't know. I more remember this level because I think it is one of the ones that gave me more trouble than just because of the boss. So I probably remember the boss fight music slightly more. But I like this song a lot better than the boss fight music. I'll say that for free. So yeah, this is a really good one.
It is a good one. My favorite, though, on the whole soundtrack is number 4 on the Critical 5, High Above the Land. This is the music for The Flying Machine, where it's the Propeller Knight stage. And honestly, I don't know if it counts because it's expanding, the 8-bit sound overall, with more tracks and whatnot. I honestly think it's one of my favorite 8-bit songs of all time. I actually get a little emotional hearing it for whatever reason. And it's just another stage, I know. Propeller Knight, he's a little goofy, fine. But the work done on this, all of the layers involved, just the melody, again, that's another one that will stick with you hard. Again, the stage is pretty difficult because, there's a lot of sky stuff, so, instant deaths with drops and things like that. But the music pushes you on, and it just feels especially inspirational. You can do anything. The kind of soaring that this song kind of makes you feel, I guess. I don't know. I found it interesting that Jake Kaufman actually posted a YouTube video on how this song looks in Famitracker. So if you're curious to check that out, I mean, Google that. It is crazy to see that in action. Like, absolutely maddening. You see all of the 8 tracks at work, all of the hex codes, and he has a brief picture at the beginning, like kind of what it all means, but seeing it scrolling and everything, oh my goodness, it's wild. I love this song so much, and it absolutely deserved to be here.
See, I just remember this song because Propeller Knight killed me a lot. He's one of the harder bosses, I think. I think he's the hardest boss in the game by far. Because he, if I remember correctly, he does like double the damage of anybody else if he hits you.
I think so.
And it's brutal.
And yeah, the boss fight song isn't as good as this, I don't think, but it still uses the ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. It still uses that in the boss fight. So it's a memorable little riff.
I think the triumphant part of this is the intro, where it's just the slow build up and then it gets into real, again, very Mega Man. More so than I think this and the last one, I think, are more Mega Man than just about anything else on the soundtrack, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to knock Matsumaya's work or anything like that. Now, to me, the most inspirational, the soaring part is like when the melody gets like really high, and it's also doing the da 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 da. I don't know. That one really resonates with me. But we'll wrap things up on the Critical 5 with an underlying problem. This is the music for The Lost City. And so this stage is like basically the final push before you get to the Tower of Fate. There's a really cool groove going on with this one. And again, like, just consider, like, this is 8-bit inspired, using a tracker that is really meant to emulate NES music. It's just think of where we are today and how it sounds today with Jake Kaufman's music. It's so good. And again, yeah, another difficult stage, but how cool that music sounds will just keep pushing you on.
So I like the part of the song that's like the but I mainly like it, and I need you to play the sample of the song so people don't think I'm nuts. But I mainly like it because when you do go fight Mole Knight, the intro to his boss fight song brings that back, but then ramps it up to make it the most intense thing ever. Just like a moment of, oh, this is happening now. Let's do this. And I love it. But like, I think I like that's the only part of that song I really dig. I really like.
Dig. I see what you did there.
Yeah, I didn't do it on purpose, but let's pretend I did. I like the stage music a little bit better than I like the boss fight music. But that one part of the boss fight music is, it gets me every time. It's so good.
Mm-hmm. So many good tracks on this Shovel Knight OST. And again, this is just for Shovel of Hope. Like, all these other campaigns have great soundtracks too.
I haven't even heard them yet.
But let's be honest, like, it's just the beginning for Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight Dig's gonna have more Jake Kaufman music, but these are really special ones, so we had to mention them. Though you have a couple tracks on the cutting room floor. Hit me with them.
Yeah, one of them is just for me. And that is Watch Me Dance. This song is a very short little piece that plays, I guess, after you beat Spectre Knight. You can go talk to a lady in town in one of the villages, and she'll just say, "Hey, you, watch me dance." And then you watch her dance. And as far as I remember, it does nothing.
That's it. Yep. Uh-huh.
But this song is one of those songs that's just, it's really fun to whistle, and that's enough for me to really, really like it. Don't judge me. I love this short little simple piece. But the one that's not really for me, that I do consider a very noteworthy piece in this game, is Fighting with All of Our Might. And this is for the boss battles with the guest characters from the aforementioned Director for a Day people, including the aforementioned Baz. So that's I remember hearing this song a lot because some of those bosses get real hard, and I was very bad at them. But I beat them. You better believe.
Yeah, they're tough. They're tough. I've never gone and had done the Kratos fight or the Battletoads fight. Of course, those get their own music because I only played the Nintendo versions of the game. But yeah, against the Baz, against Mr. Hat, all those fights, yeah, they're tricky. They come out of nowhere and surprise you. My tracks on the cutting room floor. First, I have The Rival. And this plays during the first battle against Black Knight, who's kind of like this dark version of Shovel Knight, and he's your rival. This one in particular takes place after you beat Plains of Passage. So if you're repeating that stage a lot for gold, you have to battle Black Knight a lot, and so you're going to hear the song plenty too. But it's definitely exciting energy for a beginning boss, and again, it complements that first stage and how this soundtrack sounds with this kind of boss battle level. It's so good. I also have In the Halls of the Usurper. This is the music that plays during Pridemore Keep, or the King Knight stage. And I need King of Cards now. I don't want to wait till December. I know they said that the game is done. They have finished development. I want it now. But this is a really well-designed stage. It's sometimes like the second stage you can go to. You beat the original Plains of Passage, and I think you can either go to Pridemore Keep or Spectre Knight stage. But a lot of people generally go to King Knight stage as a second. And yeah, it really kind of teaches you the basic fundamentals. You get your first magic spell here. Just really well designed, but also just a very good composition to go with it.
I think Spectre Knight was my first stage personally, but I believe you are right. Most people go for King Knight first.
It's at the top of the screen, so if you read top down, I don't know.
There's probably some psychology behind it or something.
So what will I never forget about Shovel Knight? Yeah, again, going into it, I thought I'd be really bad at this game, and I did stop, back in 2014 after buying it on release day. But when I got back to playing it and beating it and thoroughly enjoying it and going on to, Spectre Knights, the Spectre of Torment, this game really opened me up to a world of 8 and 16-bit inspired games. Like, I don't think I would have ever attempted The Messenger if I didn't love Shovel Knight. It's why I'm looking forward to the rest of Shovel Knight's games. Plenty of other games. I just beat Katana Zero, a 16-bit inspired game. Yeah, that's a little more Hotline Miami-like. But my goodness, I probably would have never picked that up had I not played and enjoyed Shovel Knight. So I do have a lot to thank, and this soundtrack is just so phenomenal. Vert does the best work.
Yeah, it's the soundtrack for me. Here's the thing. As people might know if they listen to my other show, Smasherpieces, I don't like the NES, and I don't like the games that were on it for the most part. But NES-inspired games like this, that, as I said before, are remaking what people remember the NES to be like instead of what the NES actually was. I love them. I love 8-bit soundtracks, and this game just has the full package.
It sure does. So to transition to our next game, we like to talk about a fan cover, a fan remake, whether it's on YouTube, it's on OC Remix. I do first have to mention the Shovel Knight Arranged soundtrack that got released on Bandcamp along with the original soundtrack. So it's called Strike the Earth. That's the name of the soundtrack. And it's Jake Kaufman and friends creating a bunch of different arrangements of Shovel Knight songs. I think Manami Matsumae even does one for High Above the Land, which is amazing and so good. But some of my favorites from that album are No Sense Running, which is like a dubstep version with vocals of the Lost City song, An Underlying Problem. That one's super good. But the one I'm sure you heard was Green Waves.
Correct.
Yeah, it's this amazing, amazing cover and arrangement of the Plains of Passage song, Strike the Earth. So, like, that one is like emblematic of that arranged album. Perfectly fits why Strike the Earth is so good. So yeah, got to check out this arranged album that goes along with it.
Yeah, Green Waves is so good. Again, I have to reiterate, I heard it and immediately went and bought the game.
But we're not talking about Green Waves for this one because it's officially released. We want fan covers. So this one comes from the YouTube channel Game Chops. And it's done by James Landino. This is his cover of High Above the Land, which is an EDM take on it. I really like the direction he takes this one. So please enjoy, and we'll be right back.
So let's get into Skullgirls, which is my spooky themed game for the week. Though this is the least spooky game, I think, on my list, because the only real spooky thing about it is that the characters are monster girls, but it's not really what I would call a horror game. But it's close enough, and I'm perfectly happy to be doing it, because, I mean, Pinwheel's pretty scary.
And it's also tied to a release this week.
It is, but we will get to that near the end, because Skullgirls was developed by Reverge Labs and originally released for the PS3 and Xbox 360 in April of 2012. Got a PC release following in August of 2013. It is a traditional 2D fighting game inspired by games like the Capcom Versus and Darkstalkers series, as well as some of SNK's stuff. So, the story of Skullgirls takes place in the Canopy Kingdom, a world based heavily on post-World War II America, so like late 1940s, mid-1940s, think that kind of thing. In a war-torn world, the goal of several people is to obtain an artifact known as the Skull Heart that is said to grant one woman's wish every 70 years. However, if one of those women happens to be impure of heart and touches the Skull Heart, she will become a Skullgirl, which is a monster that is mean and evil and destroys things. So when a young lady known as Marie is transformed into the newest Skullgirl and begins to wreak havoc on the Canopy Kingdom, several people from around the world make their move to defeat her and take the Skull Heart for themselves, whether it is to have their wish granted or to destroy the Skull Heart for good. It is a very, very notable game. According to the fan wiki, Skullgirls currently holds the Guinness World Record for most frames of animation per character of any fighting game that exists, featuring hand-drawn sprites that are displayed at very high resolution. If you have ever seen this game in motion, yeah, that is 100% true.
Absolutely.
At launch, the game featured a roster of 8 characters, all of them female, including the parasite-infected Philia, who was actually the first character that was made fully playable in the game, the nurse assassin Valentine, the cartoony cyborg Peacock, the transforming monster Double, the big-fisted Sarabella, the secret agent Parasol, the living weapon Painwheel, and the cat girl Miss Fortune. So, it was kind of notable, I believe, at the time for having a fully female roster. That was kind of the point. It does not have that anymore. There are a couple of male characters, but again, we'll get to those in a little bit. Skullgirls is also heavily notable for the amount of customization that it has when it comes to playstyle. You can actually pick whether or not you want to play as 1 very strong character, 2 medium strength characters, or 3 kind of weak characters. So you can pick whether or not you play a tag fighter or not, which I didn't know before actually playing this game for the first time a couple of days ago. Which brings me very easily into what are our experiences with Skullgirls? Have you played Skullgirls at all?
I was a backer for Skullgirls.
I didn't know that.
But I've never played it. I feel like I do know some things, like when you go through those characters, I can definitely picture some of them in my head. I believe Kira Buckland voices Marie, if I remember that correctly.
I believe so, yes. That sounds right.
So I know some things. I didn't actually know that, that stat about you can choose 1, 2, or 3 characters. That's really interesting. You mentioned the outline. It comes from the Capcom versus SNK series specifically. That's news to me, mostly because I didn't play it. But it's something like it sits in my Steam library. And then when you don't have people to play with, that may make it a little difficult. So I know some things, but certainly not a lot. And then some of the soundtrack too.
It was given to me for my birthday alongside a bunch of games by our friend Major Moses. Fun fact, that same group of games is also where Shadow at the Water's Edge, the Nancy Drew game that started my curse that I shall walk with for my entire life. Same grouping of games. Guess which one of those games got played? It wasn't Skullgirls.
You pick one or the other.
I don't remember what the other games were. I think one of them was Valkyria Chronicles.
Well, instead of, playing all these Nancy Drew games, if you played Skullgirls instead, maybe you go competitive in that somehow.
I would doubt that heavily. But I did when we kind of agreed that one of us had to do the game this week. It works out. It was kind of important that one of us did it now. And I kind of agreed that, I'll do it. This gives me an excuse to go play it. That was 2 months ago. And then I played it for the first time 4 days ago. Unfortunately, we had a lot of problems with the online lobbies. Apparently on PC, they're just kind of broken. This is not a problem on console, apparently, which left kind of a bad first impression for a lot of our group. But when we did get to play matches, it's a really fun game. I'm exceedingly bad at it, like I am with all fighting games, but I had a good time. I took to Peacock very early. I love her. She's so great.
I feel like I'd be terrible with range characters and zoning characters, but I like the look of Parasol a lot.
When I played as Parasol, this should give an idea as to how little I know about playing fighting games. Our friend Curb was sure to inform me that, just so you know, Parasol is a charge character. And I was like, I don't know what that means.
Oh,
and
no.
then kept playing and got destroyed.
Sonic Boom!
So, yeah, I don't know a lot about playing fighting games. I like them, though. So, that was my experience with playing Skullgirls. I hope to buy it on consoles at some point so that I can keep playing it. I had a good time with it. So, hey, we'll see.
this game gets super cheap on PC, if it's something that catches your ear and you're ever interested, like it can get like even like a couple dollars cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So keep an eye out.
So Skullgirls as a whole was initially conceived by Alex Ahad, who had been creating the initial character designs in his head since high school, like sketching out character designs and stuff. And then in college, he came to the conclusion that, you know what? These characters would probably work really well in a fighting game of some sort. And then later, he would meet a notable FGC figure, that is fighting game community, for people that do not know, Mike Zemont, also known as Mike Z, or more usually known as Mike Z, who had been working on his own fighting game engine on the side as a hobby anyways. So Ahad brought it up, and they just got to talking, decided, hey, let's make a fighting game. Because if I've learned anything about indie games, it's how these all start. It's just, hey, do you want to make this? I don't know, do you? Yeah. And then they make it.
It's all networking. It's all connections.
I wish I had that type of motivation and connections. So, pre-production on Skullgirls actually started in 2009, with Ahad taking the reins as creative director and Zemont becoming the lead designer on the game, and full production would begin the following year in 2010. Upon pitching the game to several companies, the team was eventually picked up by a recently established indie development studio called Reverge Labs. And there, they were able to form a publishing agreement with both Autumn Games and Konami. I actually, weirdly enough, could not find a ton about its overall development, like, initially, because I went to the fan wiki, I went and did a Google trawl. Their Wikipedia article doesn't have a lot about the actual development of the base game, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a lot of information, because a lot of the info about Skullgirls actually happens to come after the game had come out, including what was, I think, the biggest moment that a spotlight was placed on Skullgirls, one that brought a lot of outside attention that wasn't already on the game, being at EVO 2013. If you'll remember, back in August, we actually did an episode where we talked about Dragon Ball FighterZ and Street Fighter V. And that was because EVO was happening then. Evolution, which is the full name, the Evolution Championship Series, happens every summer. It is the biggest fighting game tournament in the world. It takes place in Las Vegas every summer. And in 2013, they had an extra slot for their main stage games and decided to make it a contest. Basically, what they said was the slot would go to whichever community raised the most money for the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. The Skullgirls community managed to raise over $78,000 for the charity, taking second place behind Super Smash Bros. Melee. I remember this clearly. This was a big thing at the moment, and it's the reason our friend Moses is a fan of Skullgirls now, because of that whole thing. That's what brought it to his attention, and it caused him to have so much respect for the developers in the community that he was like, you know what, I'm into this game. Let's do this. And I feel like a lot of people probably had the same reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Despite not getting that main stage slot, the group behind EVO, the website Sure You Can, pledged to support the Skullgirls side tournament by providing support and prize money. So that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, though, a lot of Skullgirls fans do feel like the game was unfairly snubbed from EVO in general, as it was rejected from being in EVO 2012 due to the proximity of its release date in regards to the start of the actual event, which people are now sort of doubly mad at because of games like Cross Tag Battle and Samurai Showdown in the past 2 years. Turns out the secret is money.
Yep.
Not coming out sooner.
Yeah, publisher money talks and rules.
Yeah, that's a bit of a sore spot for a lot of Skullgirls fans, but even so, I think it is still cool that they gave some prize money to that side tournament at the very least. Reverge had immediately planned to do future downloadable content after the game had released, and were actually teasing it very regularly after it had come out. But shortly after the game was released, Autumn Games started getting hit with a bunch of lawsuits resulting from the release of the game Def Jam Rap Star. I could not find what these lawsuits were about.
Oh, it sounds familiar, but I don't remember.
I tried looking on the Def Jam Rap Star Wikipedia article. I tried Googling it. Maybe I just didn't use the right keywords. That's very likely. But the point is, suddenly all of Autumn Games' money was tied up in legal fees, and they did not have any funding to provide Reverge Labs for the development of the DLC, which unfortunately resulted in the entire team being laid off from Reverge Labs. But they would quickly reform into the studio Lab Zero Games, which is what they are known as today. But since Autumn Games owned the Skullgirls IP, or I guess owns the Skullgirls IP completely, they were allowed to keep working on the game because Autumn Games said they could, which is very cool. I imagine most other publishers probably would have said, what? No, this is ours. You can just have it. Yeah.
Nobody's going to go talk to Konami and say, can we work on a Silent Hill game? Konami's not going to say, yeah, sure. Fine.
Why not? Let's do it. I think because it was still the same developers, just under a new name, that probably helped.
Right.
But, so they were allowed to continue work on the game, but Autumn Games still didn't have any money to give them to produce the DLC that they wanted to do. So they turned to crowdfunding. They set up an Indiegogo asking for $150,000 in order to develop the first DLC character, a zombie girl named Squiggly.
And this is where I got on board with Skullgirls. Again, didn't play it, but I contributed to that. I made an Indiegogo account because I was so impressed with what they did at EVO. Sure, I'll throw them some money.
Now, weirdly enough, this was actually kind of considered a controversial move for some people. Those people are called idiots. Just gonna come right out and say it. Those people were not smart, but it led to a bunch of quote unquote outrage because a bunch of people were like, $150,000 for one character? What? Why are they being so greedy? And it became a very, very valuable lesson in how much video games cost to develop. Because if one character costs that much money, how much do you think the whole game costed?
Mm-hmm.
So those people were dumb. It was a reasonable amount of money for developing a character. And luckily, that outrage didn't actually affect anything because not only did they reach their goal within 24 hours of setting up that Indiegogo, they destroyed that goal by the end, raising a total of $828,768. With this funding, they announced that they would not only be developing Squiggly, but also 4 more DLC characters, as well as a bunch of other content such as bonus stages and voice packs for characters. These other DLC characters would end up being the musical cyborg Big Band, who was the game's first male character, 2 characters who were to be decided by fan vote, and a robotic version of Miss Fortune simply called Robo Fortune, who I saw for the first time while playing, and apparently so did our friend Moses, because he had no idea how she played. She has drones and stuff. It's bizarre, but really cool. The 2 fan voted characters ended up being Eliza, who is an Egyptian-themed singer, who was apparently, according to the fan wiki, originally meant to be the antagonist of Skullgirls 2, if that would have happened. So, And Beowulf, a wrestler, and the game's second male fighter.
I do remember voting on the poll for Eliza. I don't remember the second poll, though, so... But yeah, I do remember voting for Eliza, so yeah. I didn't know that about the sequel, though. That's neat.
Yeah, judging by what the fan wiki said, there were like 20 options for possible DLC characters, which sounds like a lot to me. Oh boy, they have enough for a sequel if they ever do decide to do that for whatever reason. There's also another DLC character named Fukuwa, who is a complete clone of Philia who was created using leftover code. So she's just a recolor of Philia who in universe, non-canonically, apparently she is not canon, but she is a clone of Philia in universe. And she was added as an April Fool's character and then left in the game because it turns out players liked her. So that's kind of funny. In November of 2013, Skullgirls happened to hit another hurdle. Unfortunately, this game's sort of post-release is just hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. It's really weird and unfortunate, but they've persevered all the way through. But this hurdle came due to the fact that Autumn Games decided to cut ties with Konami due to Konami's general unresponsiveness when it came to dealing with things from the game. It's why console patches took so long, because Konami they wouldn't hear back from them. And so Autumn Games was like, yeah, no, bye. Due to this, Konami asked that Skullgirls be removed from PSN and Xbox Live Arcade by the end of the year. And so it was. But in January of 2014, Skullgirls was re-released on both platforms as Skullgirls Encore, featuring a new build and everything. The whole game, in general, was generally well received upon release, with most praise heaped on it for, its character animation, its background art, which absolutely deserving of praise. I saw a lot of criticism, though, of people that were like, some of the characters feel a little bit over-sexualized. Like, I could see that with Valentine 100% after seeing some of her animations for the first time. And a lot of people just thought that the premise was goofy and dumb, which, if you ever played a fighting game, they're all goofy and dumb. I think that's a dumb criticism for something like this, but whatever. It didn't win any awards, but it was nominated for Best Fighting Game at IGN, 1UP, and at E3, but it unfortunately did not win that at any point. Unfortunate, but what can you do? It apparently sold over 50,000 copies within 10 days of being made available, which is, it might not sound like a lot, but for an indie game that is also part of a very niche genre, because fighting games are a niche genre, let's not kid ourselves here. That's real good. It became the highest selling Xbox Live Arcade game and the third highest selling title on PSN in April of 2012. So nothing to sneeze at all. It also apparently boasted very similar performance in Japan upon being released. And as of September, according to Mike Z, the game has sold 1 million copies on Steam alone. Again, that is really good for an indie game that is already part of a very, very niche genre.
And for all the struggles they went through too, yeah, it's remarkable.
The game would later re-release again on even more platforms as Skullgirls' second Encore, releasing on PS4 in 2014 and PS Vita in 2016. It's also slated to release on both Nintendo Switch and Xbox One sometime in 2019. Switch is probably where I'll pick it up when it comes out. Though I should note that according to the Wiki article, they said that it was coming out on those two consoles in 1 month. That was in February of 2019.
Oops.
It is October. So they missed that by a little bit, but hopefully we see it soon. It is still slated to come out sometime this year. There was also a mobile port titled Skullgirls Mobile that released for iOS and Android in 2017. And it also apparently received an arcade release in Japan in 2015. And that is super cool.
Yeah.
That is probably the dream, honestly. And apparently, at Anime Expo this year, a webcomic was announced that will be published on the service Webtoon. So, hey, that's cool. I'll read that. I read a lot of Webtoon already anyways, so hey, I'll pick up a Skullgirls comic. I like the characters enough that I will definitely look into that. And Lab Zero would, of course, go on to do another successful crowdfunding campaign for their action RPG, Indivisible, which comes out today as of release. Or if you live in Europe, it comes out on Friday. But for us, it comes out today, which is why we are talking about this game today. The Switch release is still slated for sometime in 2019, but everything else comes out this week. And you should definitely look into it. I'm looking forward to it, though I don't know if I'm going to get to it right away because too much stuff coming out. There's too much.
A lot of good games in 2019.
A lot of good games. This has been a hell of a year. So, the main composer for Skullgirls was actually Michiru Yamane, who we have talked about in the past for her work on Castlevania Symphony of the Night. But one of the other notable composers for this was Vincent Diamante. So we're going to go ahead and sort of talk about him, except not really because I couldn't find anything on him very much. We did find that he is the current audio director at That Game Company, who are the studio behind Journey. That's their most famous game. He also teaches at the University of California in the Interactive Media Division, according to his website, which is literally just a solid color screen with a small box in the top center that has a single paragraph, and that is his entire website. And that's all I could find on this man. His Twitter bio had a couple more pieces of information, and obviously I was able to find some of his discography, which is he has worked on the game Flower, which is another one of That Game Company's games. This was pre-Journey, so it's not as famous as Journey was, but it is a pretty alright game. I've played it. He did the music for the mobile game Castlevania Order of Shadows, which apparently is an American-only mobile game that I didn't know existed before today. So that's interesting. His Twitter bio also mentions that he's done a bunch of Konami mobile ports, but I can't actually find a specific list. I looked on the Castlevania wiki. He doesn't have a Wikipedia article, so it's hard to find anything there. I didn't notice anything on his IMDb page, so I don't think he's lying, but I just can't find exactly which ports those would have been. He is also the composer on Sky, Children of Light, which is That Game Company's most recent release, which, fun fact, I didn't know this game existed. And I was like, wait, That Game Company came out with a game? And I didn't know about it? It looks good. And it's multiplayer? And oh, it's iOS only. That's why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember it being announced at an Apple conference. So I knew it existed, but that game was announced just as Sky. So I didn't know it had a subtitle for Children of the Light. So good to know.
Yeah, apparently it is coming to other platforms eventually. It's just not there yet. So
it better. Or hopefully it's on Apple Arcade. That'd be cool to play.
That would be interesting, though. I don't have any device that can do Apple Arcade. Man. This is the one time that I regret switching back to Android. So, as for actual stuff on this game's soundtrack, other artists on this soundtrack were Blaine McGurty and Brenton Cossack. But again, most notably, and most of the soundtrack was done by Michiru Yamane. Yamane was apparently specifically recruited to do the music for the game due to the team's feelings that her mixture of, quote, haunting gothic themes, jazz, and rock would lend itself perfectly to Skullgirls' dark deco style, and they were correct.
Absolutely. Ding, ding, ding. What a peg, what a get. If you want to hear more about Michiru Yamane, of course, please do listen to our Castlevania Symphony of the Night episode. But yeah, if that was the style they're going for with all this jazz and gothic feels, and get a little bit of rock in there, absolutely the person to call.
She was absolutely the perfect choice. This soundtrack is fantastic. Initially, it was only released digitally as a reward for people who donated $10 or more to the Indiegogo campaign. But a physical version was offered to those who donated $150 or more.
Which that bit seems a little excessive for just a CD. Unless they were doing like a record.
I imagine it wasn't the only reward, but that seems to be like the only way you were able to get a physical release of this soundtrack because, as far as I can tell, you can't just go buy it anywhere, but the digital version has since made its way onto services like iTunes and Spotify.
Hey.
So that is how I got to listen to it, because again, until like about a month ago, I had never heard any of the songs on this soundtrack, and I have been listening to it almost nonstop for the past month just to make sure I was completely ready to talk about it, and also because it's just plain good. And speaking of, that brings us straight into our 5 critical tracks. Starting with our first one, Pedestrians Crossing. So this one was done by Brenton Kosick and Blaine McGurty. It is the title and main menu music, and it's just a real nice piece, honestly. You got that bass player doing his thing. You got that very simple piano part, that sax just in the background sort of sounds like improvising, because I mean that's what you do when you play jazz. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think it really sets the tone that Skullgirls is looking for really, really well. It's not intense, but it's definitely not like relaxing or slow paced or anything. It's got a nice groove to it, a nice movement to it. I really like it.
Yeah, it's just a jazz kit tooling around. You even get the muted trumpet in there, which is pretty cool. But the star of the show is that the bass player, the walking bass, just killing it. Mm-hmm. So good. Yeah. Just sets the pace early with the drums and just getting that groove going. Yeah, what a way to sort of enter you into that world with the main menu. A shame for Shovel Knight that we didn't talk about the main theme there. It's kind of mixed in throughout the soundtrack a little bit. But for this one, like, exactly what you're going to get into with this score, for most of it at least, when you hear this.
It fits the menus, which are themed around like an old school movie, like an old style cartoon.
Yeah.
Because this game kind of leans into that aesthetic a little bit, not nearly as much as something like, say, Cuphead. But I mean, look at Peacock. She is a cartoon character moving. She's Cuphead before Cuphead, except probably not animated in the same way, I would assume. Our next song is Paved with Good Intentions. Everything on the Critical 5 from here is Michiru Yamane. This is for the Anti-Skullgirl Lab 8 stage. And this one just feels like it has very, very Castlevania vibes. Like, of all the ones in my Critical 5, this is the one that feels the most Castlevania to me, especially like old school Castlevania. Like, I could hear this in Rondo of Blood, for sure, 100%.
Yeah, I was going to say I could hear it in Symphony of the Night and, pair it there.
Mm-hmm. I would hope that at least some of the songs sound kind of Castlevania-ish, because if you're going to go get Michiru Yamane, I mean, you probably got her because her style fit what you were looking for, and so let her style come on out. This one's a little bit more synthy than anything else that I'm going to talk about today, which I don't like it as much as the jazzy stuff, but this is still like a really, really good song.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows straight up, like, you went and got this composer, you're getting this kind of song, and good thing it fits so well.
Absolutely. Number 3 is The Lives We Left Behind. this song plays on the Maple Crest stage, which this actually is a theme you kind of hear a lot. There are, I believe, 3 or 4 different versions of this song specifically on the soundtrack. And as far as I could tell, Maple Crest is just kind of this peaceful stage. It's a nice field during the fall, and you can see dogs like frolicking around in the background. It's got this beautiful, like, sort of relaxing look to it. I think this song kind of matches it. Like, it's not overly peaceful to the point where it's I Know Uta in Smash, but it does have this sort of beautiful feel to it, and also has sort of this melancholy feel behind it, because not only is this area gorgeous, but like it's sort of a piece that it's implied that none of these characters are ever going to really experience for themselves for the most part. And I really like it. Maybe I'm just being pretentious with that that feeling, but you know.
Yeah, I get it for sure. I also definitely get Symphony of the Night vibes from this one as well. You're right, definitely on the calmer side. Not as much as Paved with Good Intentions, but again, like it's Yamane to a T.
Yeah. It's just a nice little piece. I enjoy it. But not as much as I enjoy piece number 4, because our 4th critical track is Unfinished Business.
Let's go, saxophones!
This song rules. This is my favorite song in the entire soundtrack, just with a bullet, bar none. This plays on the Under the Bridge stage and is apparently also considered Big Band's theme.
Yeah, I think it was released alongside him.
I believe so. From what I could tell, this is basically his home stage. It came with him, etc., etc. Them dueling saxes, though?
Fantastic.
Oh, so good.
The Barry sax leading the way up front, and like that's the instrument like he's carrying, so like that definitely represents him well. But yeah, saxophones everywhere. I'm down. I love it. Very good.
I have probably listened to this specific song at least 30 times since I started listening to this soundtrack. It is chef's kiss. It's so good. It's so good. I don't even think I need to say more than those dueling saxes, or when they start playing the same melody later on in the song, and just generally the whole feeling behind this song is so good. More jazz.
More jazz always. You hear it, put it in the 5. Absolutely.
100%. But we're going to wind down with our 5th critical track, which I think might be my second favorite song in the game, for sure. In a Moment's Time.
Why so down tonight? Just another day that didn't go your way. Well, don't you make a side. Just take my hand, don't toss and turn. Let's just lie awake. In just a moment's time, you wonder why you ever thought you ever longed for more than you've got. 'Cause baby, you've got you and me.
Okay, like, yeah, jazz is great, but you know what else is great? Lounge.
Yeah, lounge music.
This is the end credits theme of Skullgirls. It was composed by Yamane, of course, but the vocals were done by Gela Zilka, which I believe I am pronouncing that correct. There's also a version on the soundtrack that is off vocal, and then another version that is in Japanese, which I could not find who does the vocals in the Japanese version, so I'm going to assume that might still be Zilka. Or in my headcanon, it's Yamane herself, but I doubt that. This song is absolutely incredible. It is the direct opposite of what I would expect to hear from a fighting game, even a credits theme of a fighting game, but it is really fun to like sing. It has that sort of feeling of I'd sit in a club and listen to a singer play this song.
Yeah.
That sounds great. But could you picture this song playing like in a mall at Christmas? Am I the only one?
100%. Yes.
Like that visualization popped into my head today for some reason. And I don't know why. But that's the visualization I get the most from this. There's only one issue with this song, and that is in one of the verses, it tries to rhyme down with down, and that's a crime.
Don't do like what Limp Bizkit did with Nookie. We can't be having that.
That is my one problem, because like the line is like, strike those problems down, KO, they're down. And it's like, that doesn't roll off the tongue. Come on. But that's literally my only issue with this song. It is a fantastic song. So, Cutting Room Floor. You've got two of them, and I want to hear about them.
I do have two of them. They're shorter songs, and I don't even think they go with any stage particularly. But the first one is the one I always associate with this game very deeply, and it's Pick of the Litter. So this is composed by Brenton Cossack and Blaine McGurty. This is the character select song. Honestly, it's, yeah, like I said, it's the one track that I am familiar with from this game. Like, deeply familiar with. The one I always pair with Skullgirls is this song. And it works so well as a character select screen. Just there's this good energy. It's a simple loop. It's a short loop. But it's that energy. It's kind of got that an energetic, not fully jazz, but it has like the synths added to it. Very exciting. And it works so well as a character select song that when you mod it into Super Smash Brothers, it also works there. So I really like that one a lot.
This was one that felt bad to leave off, honestly.
So I'm glad that we got to bring it up in some capacity, certainly. And then another one that I wanted to bring up was Them's Fightin' Words. Which I don't know if it's a reference to that My Little Pony fighting game.
Well, no, because that would have come out because they use Skullgirls engine, don't they?
Yeah, I think so.
So that would have come afterwards, I think.
But it's highly suspicious of the naming there. Also composed by Brenton Cossack and Blaine McGurty. I think it's used in story mode based on comments I was seeing about it. I guess that seemed to be the case. Again, not playing it, I don't know. But it's another one that like I heard and I'm like, oh, I've heard this somewhere before. I didn't know it was in Skullgirls, but yeah, it makes sense. It's got that same sort of vibe, same composers. Definitely reminiscent a little bit of Pick of the Litter. But yeah, another one that I wanted to include for listening.
For me, I also got two. One of them is The Crowd Goes Wild. This was also done by Brenton Cossack and Blaine McGurty. It is for the NMO Arena stage. And this is so different. It's so hype. I'm going to assume that by NMO Arena, this is like Beowulf's home stage or something. I didn't actually have a chance to go look into it, but that's what I'm going to assume. He seems like the only character from this roster that would explicitly play with in an arena of some sort. Also, I don't own the Beowulf DLC, so I just own Squiggly and Big Band. So I wouldn't have been able to hear this end game even if I had played more, which is unfortunate. The Switch and Xbox One versions are supposed to come with all of the DLC, so look forward to that.
I think you're right that it is Beowulf's theme.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me a lot of Dragon Ball FighterZ.
I was going to bring up the same comparison, actually, because I agree with that. It also sounds like something normally I'd hear on like a victory screen, but it's not. So, I mean, it definitely fits a wrestler. We'll give it that. And my other one is Royal Canopy Waltz. This one was actually composed by Vincent Diamante.
Hey!
So he got one. That's good. I didn't know that before putting any of this list together, so it's good that he got at least one. I'm glad. This plays on the glass canopy stage, and I don't know, I just like a good waltz. Waltzes are fun. They're nice to listen to. Apparently, though, the original test track for this stage, back when it was in beta, was In a Moment's Time, before it got its own song, which, I don't know, that sounds weird. Fighting to In a Moment's Time sounds bizarre.
It would have to be at Christmas, I mean, clearly.
I guess. Where's the mall stage, Lab Zero?
I mean, good fighting games have malls. Chocolate Milko versus Capcom.
Yeah, there was a Willamette Mall stage in that game, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, give me that mall stage, Lab Zero. I know you aren't actually working on Skullgirls anymore, but do it for me. Do it for your boy. So what will I never forget about Skullgirls? Not much, honestly. Again, I played it for the first time 4 days ago. I love the roster. They are fantastic. Every single one of them. And especially Peacock. She is my daughter now, and I love her. It's a shame that the lobby thing kind of left a bad taste in my mouth and a couple other people's mouths. Basically what would happen is we would get a couple of matches in, and then after that, we would all ready up, and then it would say, all right, starting the match in 5 seconds, and then it would unready everybody immediately when the timer hit 0. So couldn't figure out a way to fix it outside of, well, I guess we'll make a new lobby again. And after about 3 times doing that, we were like, all right, I'm done for the night. Mm-hmm. We're set. So I will absolutely probably be buying it on Switch when it comes out. I can think of no better console that I would want this game on. And I want to look into its tutorials and stuff, because it is apparently very famous for having one of the best fighting game tutorials ever made. So I definitely want to dig more into it, but I'm going to have to wait for a console version to come out that I actually want to buy.
Yeah, I think Switch would be my jumping in point too. I don't see myself necessarily sitting at a PC to play a fighting game, but Switch sounds perfect. So yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely big successes on the crowdfunding front, but it's good to bring up games that we want to talk about or feels right to talk about them based on the different game releases. And we're like, well, we've talked about the main composer already, but we'll try to do some digging on people who've also contributed to these soundtracks. And that worked out perfectly, I think, this week. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. The video version of the podcast is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version you want, over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. You can also get the podcast on podcast services all around the globe, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and take us with you on a run, in your car, at work. Honestly, we won't tell your boss that you're listening to great conversations about fantastic video game soundtracks, but just bring us with you wherever you go. Also, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST, so you can leave feedback for us on how you think we're doing, different feedback on the episodes, games you'd like us to cover. We'd love to hear your feedback on things like that. So Skullgirls is on Spotify, When it comes to Spotify, we can't be on Spotify, but we like to add the songs from the games we talk about that are on Spotify into a big old Spotify playlist. So you mentioned Skullgirls is there. What about Shovel Knight?
Shovel Knight is indeed on Spotify.
Yay!
So it's one of the few Jake Kaufman ventures that's on Spotify. But it's there, and I'm very glad. So this is another week where we've got both of our games are thrown up there.
Yeah. So that Spotify playlist is growing every week. A fantastic listen. Also, if you're at work and you've exhausted your podcast library. So we also have bonus tracks available. Should have an interview coming soon from our next composer that we got to sit down and talk with. So that's exciting. And I promise we're going to get to talk about our next bonus track venture soon, but please bear with us a little longer. Who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I am talking about Akira Yamaoka, and I'm so excited.
Oh, finally. Can't wait. That's going to be a great one. I am talking about Marcin Prisbluitz. Oh boy. We're talking about that game too. It should be a very exciting one as we continue into October. So Joe, let's play us out.
Well, before I play us out, I do want to give one more quick bump to, if you are listening to this on release day, tonight I am streaming another horror game. And of course, every Tuesday night in October, I will be streaming another horror game over on twitch.tv/Nintendo World Report. This week it is Detention. Next week it will be Little Nightmares. So please show up to that and help me not be so scared. For our transition, again, we like to highlight a cover, whether it be from YouTube, OC Remix, something like that. It was very easy to find mine because it was like one of the first search results. And usually I try not to just settle for the first thing I find, but this one was too good and I could not use it. It is a cover of In a Moment's Time from The Consoles. That's CONSOULS, featuring Insane in the Rain and Susanna Wellink. And this vocalist just kills it. She's so good. Absolutely great cover of this song. So please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.